This Artist Express program is brought to you by the Ness Home Family Foundation.
Joan, Stuart, Ross, on behalf of our crew and Artist Express, welcome. We're here in your Fremont home. It's a great place with a great view. Now, when I first saw your work, you're powerfully impressive with the scale of your work and the color. But and really, in looking at your resume, you're not only a painter, you're a printmaker, you're a poet, you're a teacher. How do you find time to be all these people?
Well, I squeeze it all in. I have a lot of energy, and I enjoy all those things so much that they just fuse. One leads into the other. It's like flowing. So I work on my painting, work on my prints, teach, and do my writing, and it's all part of my life. It's the things I really like to do. Sometimes I think I'm doing too many things, and that I should be more focused. I have a good friend in Norway who paints. She said, "Joni, I don't know, you do a lot of things." And I said, well, those are me though. Those are the things I have to do and that I enjoy and love doing. So I just fit them all in.
How did you manage to move from such a university-trained artist to one who is experimenting and doing kind of an intuitive art now?
Well, I think I used that education as my structure, and then I break it. And it's kind of been, in a way, what my art's been about all these years, is to build up a known kind of environment and then to crash it down, or to invade it, or to cover it up and then expose or dig into it. So I think that that's really a strong element of my work, is the structure that I gained from my education, but then I can go against it. And when I came to Seattle, I had come from a very rigorous background in both painting and printmaking, and Mauricio Lazansky was my printmaking teacher, and he only allowed intaglio, forms of etching and dry point, etc., and he wouldn't let us do woodcut or hand-colored prints or any kind of veering from that norm.
The traditional?
Traditional. So when I came out here, I wanted to break it, and sick of editioning, didn't want to do that anymore, but I really admired it and loved it, and it was the core. But then I wanted to explore and seek further and find new things out of it.
Now, you also mentioned Nathan Oliveira had a
Yes.
large influence on your artwork. He's a hugely famous artist. What did he do for your work?
Well, in 1977, when I was here in Seattle working, I took a 3-week workshop with him at Centrum. And he had been, of course, painting and drawing. But he had recently started doing monotypes, where he painted on a plate and printed that painting with the press, which I had been doing and teaching, and layering slightly.
That's monoprint.
That's monotype, yeah,
Monotype.
where you paint on the plate, print that painting. And I had layered a couple, 3 layers, and I was using handwork and all kinds of collage materials. But he layered 5 or 6 or 7 layers, and it just clicked something in me, and I found it a very meditative way to work, exciting way to work, and surprising way. So when I came back from that workshop, I started layering 30 layers.
Wow.
50 layers.
Wow.
That's what I'm doing now. And it's a lot like painting, but it is printing, because the pressure of the press weds the inks to the paper, and they become part and parcel, so that the surface glows and almost becomes a geological strata, so that things come up, things go down, and you never know what the press is going to do. A little bit like the kiln in ceramics, the fire. It's a mystery.
Well, you know, I've done a little bit of monoprinting. I think the audience should know more about that. You take a plate.
You take a plate. It can be, for me, I prefer either copper or zinc plates. Some people use plexiglass, but the plexiglass is not of a physical property strong enough to hold the ink up to the pressure of the press. So the ink tends to squish with plexiglass. So I like metal. Copper is stronger than zinc, but both are good. And you bevel the edges of the plate, and then you paint directly on that plate.
With brushes?
With brushes, mark-making tools, rags, any kind of solvents you're interested in using. You can use bits and pieces of detritus that you have around your studio or that you pick up to add or subtract. But I basically use brushes. And I paint on the plate just as though I were painting. I was born to paint, I feel. So it just fits right in. And then I press it through.
One color, multiple colors?
I use multiple colors when I print, when I paint the plate and print that painting. It's usually multiple colors in layered printings. Sometimes people are calling it drop, multiple drop printing, or layers that sit right on top of each other but merge also.
But the key word here is mono. And
Mono.
why is it called mono?
Well, it's called monotype because each print is unique.
Meaning what? You can't get another?
Each time that you make the pass through the press and have an image and work on that image, whether you layer or whether you don't layer on top of it, it is unique. You never get that same image twice.
So you don't have a numbered edition?
No.
Okay.
Each one exists alone.
So I take the plate, I paint on it, then I put a piece of paper on top of the ink, I put it on the press
Yeah, on
bed.
the press bed. And you register, you have a certain registration kind of setup that you have devised. There's many ways to do it. I have a certain way I do it with blotters that are marked. And then you
Put the felts on.
Down and run it through the press.
Roll it through the press, take the felts off, and then what?
And then you lift the paper that you've just printed up, and what I do is I hang it on the wall of the studio in a series. I have a sequential way of working. Not that I take certain steps at certain times with certain pieces, but I put everything on the wall so that I can choose from the work that's hanging there to print again, to print ghosts, or sometimes they're called cognates, that is what's left on the plate, or to print first prints. So I have this array of serial imagery that I can build upon, and I evolve my image that way.
two things about the image. You're working with a reversed image, right? Because when you paint on the plate, there's some magic there, and then when you pull the paper off, it's the reverse of what you painted, right? So there's always a bit of mystery.
For me, that is the mystery. Yeah, you set up a relationship with the plate, and you don't even think about the fact that it's reversed.
But you love that.
That's part of it, but it's kind of, it's moot. It's just something that is. You have to accept it and go on. Sometimes it's a little bit disturbing to people to switch over because they have a set drawing. Say a student might have a drawing that they want to reproduce in its idea, not in its exactness, but the idea of it, and then they find that it's reversed, and that it's that way with any printmaking.
I know that you're also working in encaustic. Now, does the methodology of monotyping or printmaking lend itself to encaustic? Are there similar techniques and methods? What are the similarities?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because of all of the attributes of monotype, the multiplicity is what really intrigues me. There's all these things you do. You paint, you scrinch, you scribble, you dig, you can fiddle and add and subtract, then you print, and then you layer, and then you look, and then you figure out. Well, with encaustic, it's very related because it involves cooking up the materials, the wax, the Damar varnish, the dry pigment, mixing them in a molten situation, sort of like a double boiler, so you're cooking, which I used to really like to do with food. Now I do it with my art. So you're mixing all of this up, you're cooking it, then you paint with it. It cools very quickly, so you have a sculptural kind of mass that you can deal with. You can scratch into, you can dig out of, you can add to with collage, which I do. And then you take the fire, which is a torch, and you must burn, if it's a true encaustic, you must burn it in, and that's what the word encaustic means, from the word caustic, to burn in. And you take a torch, a fire, it can be a heat gun if you're not going to use a torch, but I use a little propane torch. And then you remelt everything so that it becomes changed in its molecular structure. So it's impervious to time, to weather, to really to heat, cold, and lasts forever. The early encaustics that we look at for inspiration were made 2,000 years ago by Greco-Roman artists, and there's lots of encaustic through history that still exists almost as crisp as it was when it was painted.
And there is a sense with the wax of a slight transparency. You're looking through in a sense, a glaze. There's something behind the surface.
Yes, you have a surface interest that is almost like lacquer, but it's soft. It has a soft quality. And it can become cloudy with time. Then you need to buff it with a soft rag. But it has that same connection to glow, I think, that the monotype has. And also something that I've always loved in painting with regular materials, oils and acrylics. There's a glow that you set up if you use the materials in a certain way. Doesn't matter what color this wax is, it's just a layer starting up. You're not supposed to free this one, keep it away from the nose. Some people know this, but some people don't. In dousing wax.
I'm looking at a painting behind you that has a lot of writing, as it were, a form of calligraphy even. And I notice in your current encaustics that you're following that same direction. There's an interest for you there. And in your bibliography, you talk about your interest early on in biblical writing. Is there a connection there between the two?
I think there's a definite connection. I'm interested in script and in layers of meaning. Really, I think all of this is a metaphor for the layers of meaning that there are in life that you usually have trouble discerning, or I do, and that we always search for. So the layers of meaning can be described by this script, this writing, this mark making, and it's connected to, I think, to forms in nature. The way line, for me, describes the figure or describes parts of the body, or natural forms that I see in shells or in petals. So all of these relate to that mark, and layering them seems to imply that that unknown quality of what might be beneath, that play within a play, I used to call it, that hidden story. There's something on the surface, but there's always something underneath it.
And what about the Northwest? I mean, you have this powerful background and you have the experience of travel, but what has the Northwest itself brought to your work?
The color in the Northwest.
That's unusual to say that, because we think of this as being sort of somber.
Yeah, we think of it as a gray place, but it, for me, is a green place. And the complement of green is red. So whenever I look at green, I see red. Reflected, hidden, exposed, you know, it's there. So I see this setup of complementary color. And the Northwest brings it all out. The blue, the sky and the water are so blue that somehow or other my eyes see orange at the same time. It sets up this back and forth between the color that's present and the color that your mind sees, my mind sees. So for me, it's been an exciting place to work. The other thing that's great about the Northwest to work that might have to do with the grayness is that winters, it does rain, you do feel cocoonish, and it's been wonderful not to regret that I can't be outside. I'm not a skier. Don't have a boat, although I enjoy drawing boats and looking at boats, being on them if someone else is doing the work. But being in one studio in this environment is really great because you get a lot of work done. And I think that's part of the answer to one of your other questions, is how do you do so much? Well, it's an environment that really nurtures working at something creative.
Now, why don't you then describe, through naming a few of your pieces or talking about a few series titles, either the continuity or the completion of different ideas in what is now a 30-some-year career.
I'll start with the series of works, that one of which is in back of me. They're called text paintings. And it's a series of large work. They're about 5 feet by 8 feet. And in this series I used text from poems that I've written. But I took the words as forms. I wanted to use the words as a kind of energy and have the form of that phrase be an entity in itself. It didn't really have to be read. You don't have to know what it's saying or what the context of it is, I feel, to get that flow of its meaning because of its shape, its form, how it's layered, the kind of energy in the mark. So I used these words that I had put together in poems as embodiments of the form. And the series evolved using color as really a counterpoint for these sections of words. They've been exhibited sometimes with the poem next to them, sometimes without. You don't really need to have the poem. there. Sometimes I've, seen the connection in the viewer between the two, but I feel you don't need to have that. The piece is about those words as an embodiment of the intention of meaning. And it's my meaning in this shape. So I've worked with that a lot in my most current work. And my monotypes come from working with organic forms, almost dancing linear forms juxtaposed with color, as in this piece, Incandescent Vines. And that has led me to work with text pieces that don't necessarily have shapes from nature, but that imply form to the viewer. And one of those is called Disappears. It's from a poem called Disappears, where I talk about how things are present and then they go missing, or they're lost. They are part of your memory, but they've gone to another place. And that is implied in the words, and in the shape the words take, and in the little context, the little phrase that I pick. And I see that those are an outgrowth of the organic references.
You're suggesting to me that the changes in your work tend to be personal changes then. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they're reflections of different times in your life?
I think my work does grow with me. I have, like everyone, politics, ideas of how I see the world. And my work is about those ideas, not in a specific event connotation, an event in the outside world. It's an event in the inside world.
Now, you must have struggled. I mean, in 30-some years of doing art, I know there's struggle. And so what keeps you going? What keeps you ticking? Why do you keep coming back? What's it about?
Perseverance is a word I learned early on. It really is a perseverant kind of activity. You must be constant with it. You can't say, I can't do it. You can always do it. And you have to believe that you can do it. Sometimes you have days and maybe periods of time where you're less excited about what it is you're doing, even though you make a body of work. You love it because you make it, you're autonomous, it's yours, but there are parts of it that you think are more successful than other parts. But you have to go with the whole thing, the fact that you're working on your art because it's you and you're worth something, and your ideas and your creativity are valuable. So that, and I see it as a communication that the artist has with herself and with her community, that has to keep you going. If it doesn't, you got to get it somewhere.
Are you suggesting then that perseverance is equal or greater than talent?
I think that perseverance is the main element in most everything that's creative. Yes.
And so when you're talking to a younger artist or a beginning artist, is that your emphasis?
Yes, it is. You, as a teacher, you want to inculcate in your students really good habits of learning from art, prior art, of developing ways of working that show their ability to understand the real world. You want to also develop their ability to look inside and find a new way to express the real world and the unreal world, the world that exists in their subconscious or unconscious. So you're trying to mix all this stuff up with students so that they can then put it together in a unique way. That takes perseverance. Talent is, everybody has probably a definition for talent, but that's what I see talent as. The talent to put it together is talent. Being able to draw something the way it looks is great, and that can contribute. But being able to put that together, that's the heart of it.